It was a cool, gray afternoon in late October when Jessica Tran first met Martin Holloway. The sky was bruised with low, heavy clouds that seemed to press down on the city, and the crisp air hinted at an early winter. Jessica was running late, her phone buzzing relentlessly as clients vied for her attention. She had been a real estate agent for nearly 7 years, and while the job had its ups and downs, she loved the thrill of finding the perfect home for her clients. That's why she ignored the gnawing sense of unease when Martin, a well-dressed, charismatic man in his early 40s, called her out of the blue. His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, as he described his interest in a remote property on the outskirts of town, a fixer-upper Victorian, once grand but now long abandoned. "I've been looking for something with character," he said with a chuckle that sent a shiver down her spine. She hesitated, but the commission on a property like that could be substantial, and she was behind on her sales target for the month. So she agreed to meet him at the house the following afternoon. Jessica arrived at the property just before sunset. The house loomed at the end of a winding gravel driveway, half shrouded in creeping ivy and shadows. Its windows were dark, some shattered, others boarded up. The place reeked of abandonment, and the surrounding woods seemed to close in like a waiting predator. Jessica parked her car and hesitated, clutching her coat tighter around her. Something about the place felt wrong, but she shook it off and approached the front steps where Martin stood, smiling warmly. He greeted her with a firm handshake, his grip cold and lingering a moment too long. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, gesturing toward the decaying facade. Jessica nodded, forcing a polite smile, and followed him inside. The interior was worse than she expected. Peeling wallpaper, dust-laden furniture, and a heavy, oppressive silence that seemed to press into her lungs. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but when she glanced at the screen, she saw there was no signal. As they moved from room to room, Martin's questions grew odd. He asked about the thickness of the walls, if the neighbors were close by, how soundproof the basement might be. His gaze lingered on her too long, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. The unease in Jessica's gut sharpened into fear, but she kept her composure, telling herself she was overreacting. Then he suggested they check out the basement. Her breath hitched. The doorway to the basement gaped like a dark, yawning mouth. The air seemed colder there, damp with a smell like rotting earth. She hesitated, and Martin, his smile fixed, said softly, "Ladies first." Jessica's pulse thundered in her ears, but she took a cautious step forward, phone clutched tightly in her hand like a talisman. The stairs creaked ominously beneath her feet as she descended, each step amplifying her sense of dread. At the bottom, she found herself in a cavernous space filled with old, rusted tools, shattered furniture, and something else. There were dark stains on the concrete floor, too dark and sticky-looking to be just old paint. Chains hung from the ceiling beams, their cold metal glinting in the dim light. Her breath came in ragged gasps, and she turned to tell Martin they should leave, only to find the door at the top of the stairs swinging shut. The lock clicked. Her scream tore from her throat, high and sharp, but it was swallowed by the heavy silence of the basement. Jessica pounded up the stairs, banging on the door until her fists ached, her skin splitting against the wood. "Let me out!" she shrieked, but there was no response. Only the sound of footsteps retreating, slow and deliberate. Then she heard it, the faintest whisper of something dragging across the floor behind her. She turned slowly, her stomach dropping into a pit of ice. In the far corner of the basement, something stirred. A shape, a body? No, bodies, multiple. Wrapped in plastic, half hidden under tarps, motionless yet somehow watching. The smell hit her then, putrid and suffocating. Her knees buckled and she nearly vomited, but a flicker of survival instinct pulled her back from the edge. She scrambled into the shadows, wedging herself behind an old cabinet, heart pounding so loudly she was sure it would give her away. She clamped her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, sobs caught in her throat. The footsteps returned, slow, methodical, hunting. A beam of light from a flashlight swept across the walls, pausing, lingering, moving closer. Jessica's breath came in shallow, ragged gasps as the beam passed inches from her hiding spot. Then silence. The light clicked off, the footsteps faded. For a long, agonizing moment, Jessica sat frozen, her muscles locked in terror. Her mind raced. Was he gone, or was he waiting in the dark? Her phone was useless, no signal, and even if it worked, she doubted the walls could let a single sound escape. She had to move. Slowly, painfully, she slid out from behind the cabinet, her body shaking so hard her teeth chattered. She crept across the floor, avoiding the slick stains and the lifeless forms under the tarps. But as she reached the stairs, she heard it, a soft click like a camera shutter. She spun, and in the brief flash of a light, she saw Martin standing at the far end of the room, holding something in his hands. Not a camera, a knife, and he was smiling. Jessica ran. She bolted up the stairs, ramming her shoulder into the door again and again until it splintered, pain lancing through her arm. She burst into the hallway, disoriented, heart hammering. Martin's footsteps thundered behind her, his voice low and mocking. "You can't run, Jessica. You can't hide." She fled down the hallway, doors slamming shut as she tried them, all locked. Panic clawed at her throat. She threw herself into a side room, a parlor, dark and suffocating, heavy curtains pulled tight. She pressed herself into a corner, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, trying to stifle the ragged gasps escaping her lungs. She could hear him, feel him moving through the house, whistling softly, his footsteps slow, almost playful. Jessica's mind raced. She needed a weapon. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on an old, broken lamp. She gripped it in trembling hands, its weight insignificant but comforting. The doorknob rattled, a sharp, deliberate turn. The door creaked open slowly, darkness pooling in the space like liquid night. Jessica held her breath, the lamp trembled in her hands. But he didn't enter, he just stood there waiting, as if savoring the terror he knew was radiating off her in waves. Suddenly, the sharp ring of a phone echoed through the house. His phone. Martin cursed under his breath, the sound jarring and sharp. Jessica seized the moment. She flung the lamp at the door, the crash shattering the silence. She burst past him, sprinting toward the front door, her vision a blur of tears and panic. The front door, locked, deadbolted. She fumbled at it, screaming, crying, yanking at the handle until her fingers bled. Behind her, Martin's footsteps closed in, the thud of his boots growing louder, faster. She tore a heavy candlestick from a nearby table and swung it wildly, connecting with something. His arm, his face, she wasn't sure, but he grunted in pain. She threw her shoulder into the door again and again until, crack, the wood splintered, the bolt snapping free. She stumbled onto the porch, the cold night air shocking her system. She ran, barefoot, through the dark yard, branches clawing at her skin, rocks tearing into her soles. Behind her, Martin's footsteps crashed after her, his breathing ragged and furious. The woods. She fled into the trees, the darkness swallowing her whole. Twigs snapped, branches lashed her face, and her breath came in ragged, wheezing sobs. Her foot caught on a root, and she tumbled, the air knocked from her lungs. She lay there, dazed as his footsteps slowed, stopped. She held her breath, biting her lip until it bled, willing herself to disappear. Silent. Then his voice, low, calm, closer. "I'll find you, Jessica. It's only a matter of time." She squeezed her eyes shut, tears streaming, her body trembling. Minutes passed like hours. The footsteps eventually faded, but she knew better than to believe he had left. She crawled deeper into the underbrush, every movement sending waves of pain through her battered body. Her fingers scraped over something cold, metal. A drainage grate. Barely large enough for her to squeeze through, but it was her only chance. With agonizing effort, she pried it open and wriggled inside, scraping her skin raw as she pulled the grate back into place above her. The space was tight, suffocating, the air damp and putrid, but she stayed as still as possible, her body crammed into the darkness, praying she wouldn't be found. For hours she lay there, her heart thudding in her ears, every creak of the woods above sending fresh terror coursing through her veins. At some point, she must have passed out from exhaustion, because when she opened her eyes, dawn was breaking, pale and cold. Carefully, she pushed the grate aside and emerged, filthy, bloodied, and shaking. The house stood in the distance, silent and dark, as if it had swallowed her nightmare whole. No sign of Martin, no sign of anyone. She ran until she found a road, flagging down a car, sobbing, unable to form words. The driver called the police. Jessica told them everything, but when they arrived at the house, it was empty. No Martin, no bodies, no sign of struggle. It was as if the nightmare had been erased. But Jessica knew the truth. Somewhere out there, Martin Holloway was still waiting, watching, ready to strike again. And next time, he might not let her go. If you enjoyed this spine-tingling story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales that will keep you up at night. And remember, you never know who's watching from the shadows. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.